guys, Paul McClatchie from Engage People. Our purpose is to align business with talent, and I'm delighted to be joined today by Fergus Doyle. So Fergus has an engineering background, runs a great business which advises lots of organizations in the, we'll talk about it more, but the manufacturing distribution space amongst others. It's called the Business Troubleshooters. I've got to work with Fergus over the last number of years, where Fergus would very often advise companies, about some of their hiring needs, and it's very often actually financial controllers and senior finance people that we chat about. So we'll jump into all of that, maybe a bit about your background, about the current business environment, and really what Irish businesses can do at the moment in terms of the state of play, how they can maybe improve things, different sort of initiatives that are out there. But before we jump into all of that, Fergus, we're recording this at the end of August 2020. How's life at your end?
Yeah, well, it's a lot better than it was in the middle of March. I think we've all, outside of essential service business, outside of those that were critical to being in operation through the lockdown period, I think every business took a big hit. We're no different. We saw a 50% reduction in Q2, but we hustled real hard, and our business is back to probably 75–80% of pre-COVID numbers, which isn't too bad.
Yeah, good man, good man. And just to get maybe a bit more of a sense about the Business Troubleshooters, and I know you've got the funky background going on there. So do you want to maybe tell us a little bit about the business and maybe the types of companies that you typically work with?
Yeah, look, I suppose the high level stuff, we started the business in 2009, just in the teeth of the last recession. Not sure I expected another recession this soon, but we work with organizations typically around 30–40 people, predominantly in the manufacturing, distribution, the engineering kind of businesses, and they're largely owner-led or second generation. And for the most part, we get engaged in a business that's very successful, would probably be in the top 5 in their sector, but are stuck to get to the next level of growth. And we come into the business to essentially implement a level of change around systems, processes, people, to allow that business reach its full potential. Typically, the entrepreneur has come to the level of their ability to manage that size of an organization. Then we put the structures in place to allow that business grow further. And like the background here, we put boots on the ground to make the magic happen. So it's not a remote control, it's not an advisory service. It's actually go in and implement the change necessary. And then, of course, in certain instances, we need some senior finance folks, and that's where we talk to you guys.
Yeah, very good. And that was one of my first questions. So generally, when you're looking at a business, I think one of the first things you guys look for is a set of monthly management accounts, and then you see where you're at that point.
Yeah, look, that's part. If you think of the pillars of a business, you largely have a finance function, you have a sales and marketing team, and you have a delivery or operations side of things. Pretty much all of our customers will have a decent enough ERP system, so they collect data. And the part that they don't do from that largely is understand the data and manage it. Now, we're not business analysts or that kind of thing, but you first have to capture the information. So around finance and that, clearly P&Ls, cash flow forecasts, your debtor creditor book, your loan obligations, just to understand where you are. Are you making money? Are you losing money? How much are your margins? So that data is there, but often it's not in an understandable fashion. So we work with the finance team to go, right, what does a monthly set of accounts look like? How do we close out the month 7 days after the end of the month, so that we have a pack to look at? And now that gives you, it's just, for the most part, it's historical data, but at least now we have information. We do that similarly in sales, and we do it in operations. So to see from the sales side, what's the new business coming in, so we can forecast, and then operations, how's that all working? Are we delivering on the promise made by our sales folks?
Yeah, very good. And just in terms of the climate at the moment out there, so you and I were chatting during the week, and we were sort of saying, look, there's clearly winners and losers, and probably most are in the middle. What do you think is the climate out there, maybe with some of your clients at the moment, or maybe tell us the good, the bad, and the ugly as to what you're seeing at the moment?
Yeah, look, I think we're privileged to have a great broad spectrum. So we've a cohort of customers who were deemed absolutely essential, and they've seen 15, 20, sometimes 30% growth because they had essential services. They were from making food as an example. That was an essential service. Then there's the medical side of it, clearly an essential service. And they literally, just supported our country to feed the whole supply chain, right from food, all that kind of stuff that we consumed, and then into the HSC, private medical centres, nursing homes and such. Now that's probably 5-10% of the overall business, maybe, and even single digits, more than 10, 11, it's more maybe 5, 6, 7%. Then clearly there have been businesses who've been dramatically affected around hospitality and those kinds of things. But in the middle, what we've seen is a large level of innovation. I would say today, you look back in March, everyone was going like, what kind of a holy crap situation. Today, there's very much a sense of optimism. It's a different kind of recession than the last recession. The last recession, it was very much a recession of lack, lack of money, lack of cash. It was global in nature. I know this is global, but there was a broken system in place in the last recession. This, one of the good things that the government have done is that they've pumped money in through wage subsidy schemes and other programs that have worked quite well in providing a level of cash in our back pockets that we can go and buy the coffee, buy the sandwich, that kind of stuff. Last recession, that wasn't necessarily there. So there is, most of the guys that are in our customer base and network, busy talking to 2 or 3 guys yesterday, specifically around this, and there's a mood of optimism now, and a bit uncertainty, of course, because we don't have a crystal ball, we don't know what's coming down the track, but it's that thing of, okay, well, let's go do something, let's not sit back, let's go do. And I think that's the overriding feeling, is that we get up and go do something, and that's the mid cohort. So I would say a good 80% of owner managed businesses that are out there at the moment.
And those in the essential services space, in terms of who are up, and it could be in some cases 20-30% is modest, some of these businesses have grown really significantly. Have they just redoubled their efforts, working harder, or are you seeing those businesses being restructured as well, or is the expectation that I guess, you make money while the sun shines, or are they hiring people, or how have they adapted to increased demand?
Yeah, it's a bit of a blend. So even some of the essential type guys took a shock at the start, because everyone can look back now and go, well, if you were into ventilators, if you were into PPE, if you were into that game, well, very few companies actually stocked that, because it wasn't, everyone knows what PPE is now. 6 or 8 months ago, if you'd have mentioned that to someone, they'd look at you like you had 2 heads. So they had to adjust their supply chain. So they were in the market. Let's just take an example. You get a medical supply company selling into the HSE, and they're selling devices, they're selling syringes, they're selling, that's their bread and butter, right? So that will increase naturally. But the buyer of that product says, hey, can you get me masks? Can you get me aprons? Can you get me gloves? So they have to source that. And of course, there was initially a global shortage of these products, but then that caught up quite quickly. So they were just adding an old product set, if you like, to their existing supply chain. So now that just grew. There was no real shift. 1 or 2 other companies that we know, like 50% of their business fell out. Like anyone who was attached to the events business, as an example, that just shut off. But then one particular company we're working with found a product suite that essentially lifted the whole sales back up and ahead. So they met the market need, so took their core skill and then found another product set and went after that product set. So I think in answering your question is, did they restructure? They are restructuring, because there's if you're at 100% and you're gone to 120, something has to, you got to do something slightly different. So in the essential services, that's typically what happened. It's folks got a new product set, same channel, and then went, right, okay, well, we've got to either build capacity, build the ability, technologize, those kinds of things.
Yeah. And just in the area of innovation, so a lot of the people watching this are going to be maybe in the finance space or the HR space, or it could be other sort of business owners. How have you, because I know you guys are, very strong, work with your clients and really encouraging sort of innovation, stay really close to your customer. And I hear you saying that, on a regular basis. So say to an Irish business owner who has run a very good business, and under normal circumstances, probably the budgets for 2020 we're looking very healthy. Is it a case of getting everyone together in a room, chatting about what the options are? What would be the steps you would take to sort of promote innovation within a maybe a mid-sized Irish company?
Yeah, I think parts to it, right? Is if you bring a group of people in without, you bring, say, your senior management team, 5, 6, 7 people, and you look for innovation, you'll get absolute ideas, but they may not be aligned with the market. So what we've really been sort of doubling down hard on is your top 20% of customers that are out there. That's typically where the revenue comes, the large revenue, but they're looking for solutions to their problems. So what we're encouraging, actually it's a little bit stronger than encouraging, we're telling the business development folks to get in front of, if they can, or at least get on a phone, their top customers, and have a human chat, because I think everybody's been affected by this. I was watching your video with Shane Craddock about the headspace. He was talking about headspace, mental issues, the depression maybe, or well-being in general. These folks are humans at the end of the day. Yes, they're customers, but they've had challenges with, rearranging their business, rearranging their working, their own working. Have a chat around that, going, hey, how are things? How are you handling this? And then going, okay, what type of challenges are you now seeing? Because there's a lot of people look at, well, okay, we'll sell to our customer, but if we solve our customer's customer problem, now we've a business. And that's, you only get that from chatting, going, hey, how have you been hit? Well, bar a very small percentage of businesses, everyone's taken a hit. Then your customer now has new challenges. We've spoken about this. They're solving different problems today that didn't even exist 6 months ago. And that's where true innovation comes. So if you get close to your top 10, top 15% of customers and ask them, what challenges are you seeing? Out of 20, 30 conversations, you're going to see a common thread with those customers of, here's the problems we have. Now innovation can happen in solving those problems. I think sometimes blue sky thinking on its own, it's good, but actually it can come up, it can solve a problem that's not there, that there's no market in. Whereas if you engage with your customer, get really close to them and go, okay, 6 months ago your problem was, I don't know, just whatever it was this. That problem is totally different now. The challenge they have is totally different.
Yeah.
And if you can align the resources and skill set and ability of your business with solving that problem, and that's where we're seeing companies really fighting back hard, is that they take what they do very well and align it with what their customers now need.
Yeah.
And then now you have a business model. Now you have something that, and that, I think that's, that's where innovation and need come quite together, as opposed to just being innovative for the sake of being innovative.
Yeah. And it's not, I mean, in our own sector, so we invested in a video interview platform in January, and we were using it to speed things up, because what we were finding was just, you could be running a process for, say, a finance manager, a financial controller. You might have someone who's outside Dublin or was, commuting. Tricky to arrange an interview. It might take 2 weeks. So we record a 20-minute conversation of us with them. They get to demonstrate their communication skills, and that very often skips out of, the first round interview with the client process. That's here to stay. Basically, there's no question beyond COVID. So, but if COVID-19 hadn't come along, I'm not sure we would have been exploring it maybe to the same extent, and similar with some of the online testing tools. So yeah, no, I certainly agree. And I mean, in relation to, so I want to chat to you a little bit about the remote working, and I know maybe on one side you've got maybe some of the guys who are in the distribution manufacturing, they're maybe slightly different, but you've obviously got lots of other clients, whereby some of the team are working remote at the moment. It's great that you and I can speak very frankly, because sometimes when I speak to people, they're like, they're reluctant to lay their cards too much on the table, because, they're sometimes scared to think, well, if this is what I really think, but if I put this out there, our company maybe wants to give a different impression. So will we chat about remote working and your experience of the days? Yeah.
Look, I suppose even ourselves in our business now, you look back on it going, God, it was very inspired. We designed our business around remote working. Now that's not visionary. It's not like, God, your man had. First off, the cost of setting up an office and all the rest of it. Back then, we went into the cloud very early on. Why? It was cheaper. Why would you sit a server in the corner for 10 grand when you pop it up into the cloud at 50 quid a month, kind of a thing? The VoIP phone system and all that. So we, in our business, could go remote very quickly. Everybody had access to all the Microsoft products, Zooming. We changed our business model to do a blend. A lot of it was on site prior to COVID. Then we got to a blend of using Zoom and on site, because, change doesn't happen down a wire. You got to go and meet people as well. So that's us. But let's take the broader market, and we're seeing two distinct, maybe three distinct areas. Let's start with two of them in any event. One is if you have a service business, the remote working can work quite well, because ordinarily people can, have a laptop, have Zoom, have the phone system transferred to their house on the VoIP phone systems, that kind of stuff. That works quite well. In a distribution manufacturing arena, boxes don't pack themselves, widgets don't get made. We haven't got that advanced yet. But there's a hybrid piece of some of the office folks might be able to stay at home. But there is, and I actually spoke to somebody earlier in the week about this, is it's the old, well, I need them here. I need them sat in the desk. And kind of just, kind of ask the question, why? Well, look, if I know they're here, and if you know they're here, what? And I think this opened up a broader conversation is owner managers have to learn how to manage by output, not by input. And that's really the fear is, well, what if they're doing if they're not here? Well, you set them a series of tasks and you manage them by tasks, by, do they need help? Are they getting to the work? You have to develop a different management style. And I think there's a lot of owner managers are struggling with that is, well, if they're not here, they're not working. Well, okay. I don't particularly, I don't believe that. I think people want to do a day's work. What they might struggle with is what to do. So you have to now do, well, by Friday, can I have these things? Instead of saying, well, they're at their desk, they must be busy. So it's now that changing the management style, that's going to be difficult for folks. That's not an easy thing. Some folks adapt quite easy to it, but that management by output, hey, Paul, I need you to do these 3 things by Friday. And then check in every day or every other day. Are you getting along with that? Then also the remote working we've heard this other side, it's not suiting everybody for the employee either, because we're social animals, and your box room or your dinner table or the countertop, without the casual conversation, that whoever thought work-life balance would involve work, right? It's that thing, if you get out, you're at home, you're working, but actually to be in the office now where you're feel part of a community, feel part of a shared purpose. And again, I was talking to someone about this is, okay, you even if folks are remote, you've got to bring them together to feel part of the brand, to feel part of the company. Otherwise, they'll not. That's the human piece.
And I think like the interesting part, so I'd be in total agreement with what you've mentioned there, that I think the hybrid piece works. Now, just because we're based in Dublin too, and office space, it's extremely expensive. And obviously, I was speaking to a guy this morning, he's an accountant. He was saying, look, we could, add a serious amount to our bottom line by, cutting our property facilities in half, and he goes, and all the associated costs that goes with that. But he goes, well, we're not sure what impact it's going to have. Will people still want to work for us, etc.? So I think the smart strategy is, and I've spoken to some really good and hosted some really good conversations, some HR in the human resource profession. I think having those discussions, what you might call it, say, a heat map, to understand what someone's working conditions like at home. So to me, working out your bedroom is not fit for purpose. Basically, you're in your bedroom then 18 hours a day. It's a very short-term solution. Now, on a Friday afternoon to clear out your inbox, fine, basically, and I'd be all up for that. And I think if it saves commuting, etc., I think it's definitely good. I'd be of the view of that sort of maker and manager approach, right? So you and I are both effectively, we run our own businesses. We're entrepreneurs. I think to get people around, the energy that goes with that. So if we're making proactive decisions, or even if we're doing sort of proactive outbound calls, to me, it works better. The energy is really good from a team perspective, and I'm not sure we'd ever be able to replace that. And we've definitely had some good outcomes from remote working, and I think we'll be able to attract some really good people by being able to offer that sort of flexibility. But I think having an extreme view, and I hear, because you were saying there's extreme views from some people saying, no, look, we ain't going to do it, and some sectors you can't. I don't think that's ideal, but I would be careful of going the other route, basically, because I think that some people might sign up to it, but I'm not sure in terms of over the longer term as to how maybe inspired some people would be. And I also think that there's different personality types. I think some people are, and this, it doesn't make someone a bad person if they drift, or instead of making 5 calls, they're going to go flick on, make a cup of tea or an extra cup of tea. But I think it's understanding that, so I think it's understanding the personal circumstance, the job, how proactive do they need to be in that job. And then, to a degree, sometimes and myself included, when there's people around, you push yourself more, and it's probably having an awareness around that.
I think there's a part too with it, Paul, is the business owners or the leadership team have to get better at communicating, which requires engagement. So
Yeah.
if you decide, okay, we'll have a hybrid model, you've got to check in with people. So the cup of coffee you used to have in the cafeteria with them, or that ad hoc drop by, you've got to do the same thing over the wire. Yeah. Otherwise, people will slowly, and like you said, I think I'm quite disciplined, but I'm not, right? But if folks, when they go home, they try to be disciplined, and then, like you said, stuff gets in the way. Yeah. When you're in an office environment or when you're around people, your head gets back in the game because you're surrounded by it. But if the DPD guy's hitting the doorbell, if there's something else distracting you, it requires a very, very strong person just to come back and sit back in and slot to do the gig. And that's where the management team and the leadership of the business has to connect a bit more, because the casual walk by that you used to have is no longer there. So now you have to put that in, and that's over the wire, typically, be it on a phone or be it something like this, just to keep the human connected, keep them grounded, keep them supported. So it's going to require more effort by managers, I would suggest, if we're working on a away from home business model, Sorry, at home model, forgive me.
And you've got the other fun piece. You said, I love my husband or my wife, but I don't want to spend, 24 hours. Yeah. So if we talk maybe just about the, and I know you guys have been very proactive in terms of speaking with some of your clients around some of the funding opportunities that are out there. And look, I think, it's not easy for anyone at the moment. And I think the government probably are doing their best at the moment, but it would appear that the early days, the communication was decent, and obviously you mentioned that the COVID payment scheme came in quite quickly. Where are we at the moment, and what advice would you give to maybe a company who are looking at the course over the next months? And obviously, we're not accountants, but what's your sense of some of the funding that's out there at the moment?
So look, let's start with the wage subsidy scheme. It was a great idea, and it injected much needed cash, and that worked very well, and it was instantaneous, and it's there, and we can see the results of that. Then you have some of the government institutions. So let's say it was local enterprise offices, Enterprise Ireland, IDA. Some was grant aid, some was actual, a voucher scheme. For the most part, they work okay. Some of the feedback we'd have around the Enterprise Ireland thing is, you've let's say you get 50 grand of a funding, but you've got to spend 50 to get the 50 back. Sometimes the company just doesn't have the 50 to spend to get the 50, that kind of thing. So it's well intended, but trickle through. There are other EI schemes that are quite, they literally are liquidity. They are grant. Money's in to do something, and away it goes. So for the most part, that's working okay. Haven't heard too much negativity about it, other than, well, I need the 100, I got to spend 50 to get the 50 back. If I don't have the 50 to spend because I've got to keep the business alive, the money never turns around. You then get into government-backed schemes around SBCI funding, which essentially are, for folks who may not know what that is, it's where the government underwrite up to 80% of a loan, and the loans are structured. I think the last time I checked, there was 19 different things you could apply for. Anything up to 1.5 million, $500,000 was unsecured, very low interest rates, payment holidays for 12 months. In theory, works terribly well. Unfortunately, the administration of that runs through the banks, the main pillar banks, and they have to run that loan as if it was a regular loan that goes in through their credit. And then what we've seen is folks that don't need it are getting it, and folks that need it aren't getting it. And look, I'm not saying that's across the board, but the people we're talking to, talked to one guy, he's got 200 employees. We're talking about the funding. He said, yeah, we just secured €1 million. I went, oh, that's deadly. He said, yeah, we don't really need it, but we have it now. And it's cheap money, and we'll use it to expand the business. I went, right, that's interesting. And then there's many others where they actually need it and they don't qualify because of the criteria. They're not bad businesses. They just, if you shut down for a quarter, you don't have cash flow to pay anything, right? That's the whole idea of it. So the mechanism for getting the sign off of the loan is arduous. Like, it's months and months and months, not weeks and weeks. So again, it's a well-intended scheme, and I'm not beating up on the banks here. They're putting it through their own credit system and process. Unfortunately, that is ferociously long and tedious, and businesses will go out of business because they don't have that liquidity. So that's the main pillar banks. The secondary, what we call peer-to-peer funding companies that are out there, there's linked finance, there's grid finance, folks like that, baby. These are essentially second tier peer-to-peer lending. Their criteria is far less. Now they're different scale. You're not talking millions of funding. You're talking of tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands. Their mechanism is quite fast. Their credit approval is very, very quick. The requirement of documentation is what I call basic and needed, but simple to put together. Whereas the banks require an encyclopedia, forecasting of 3-year plans, cash flow analysis, all this stuff. The peer-to-peer require a different level to fund, and the money's very quick into the marketplace. So that's kind of giving you a broad spectrum that the SBCI is well intended, but just isn't getting there quick enough, and continues to not get there quick enough. And businesses will go out of business because of that. Not because they're bad businesses, just you shut down for a quarter or 4 months. There is no cash in the business necessarily. The tier 2 peer-to-peer guys, I think they're doing great business, and we're not affiliated with any of them, but with our customers, they say they secured 50K, 75K, 125, 200, and that gets the machine rolling, and then the business continues on. The government-backed schemes, some of them are working great. Some of them are, again, trying to do the right thing, but just need a slight adjustment, if you like, to make them work really well.
Yeah, very good. And just before, and that's very, very interesting to hear. Before we sort of wrap up on that piece, in terms of the resources then, so is it generally sort of out there and available, or have any of your clients availed of or have you heard of any particular, loans or stuff that's maybe accessible or more accessible than others, or do you feel they're all similar, that it's sort of an arduous scheme to work through?
If it's seeking government funding, it becomes quite laborious. And in our marketplace, it's entrepreneur-driven businesses. They're not numbers guys or girls.
Yeah,
they're actually the furthest thing from the data people. So putting financial plans together is, it's very, very difficult because it isn't their skill set. Yeah. And then that's why you and I have chats, is that, look, we need some solid finance folks to help them put this stuff in together. But they don't have that level of capability typically in their business. So when they're asked to put very, very significant financial plans and models in place, I've had many conversations. I'm just not going to do it. Not going to do it. Why? Because it's going to take me forever and I won't get it right. And when I send it in, it'll be sent back to me.
Yeah. And anything else we've missed out that's relevant, do you think, to the sort of cohort of companies you deal with? I mean, it's good to hear you've got, some of your clients are optimistic. I think there is a nervousness. Obviously, some of the counties are still in sort of relative lockdown at the moment. Hopefully, kids going back to school might free people up a little bit. We're all hoping that, town is quiet, Dublin's quiet at the moment, but hopefully, the course of the coming weeks, we'll see that change.
Yeah, I think that, look, none of us know what the next few months, or, let's say 2 quarters, so Q4 and Q1 of next year, what they're going to do, how these local lockdown schools, everything you say there, is it debilitating nervousness? No, it's unpredictability. Also, the government aren't being very clear on what is allowed and what isn't allowed. And in owner-managed businesses, they'll make decisions based on, well, you haven't told me, so I'll do. And that's not in any way a criticism. If you give me black or white, I'll handle it. If you give me grey, I'll find the grey, right? Yeah. So the local lockdowns, we've seen the recent ones in Laois, Offaly and Kildare, again, needed. So I'm not here, slamming what they did, but it's, where's the next, can Kilkenny get closed down? Can Dublin get closed down? Can Galway get closed down? And what does that do depending on your business? As an example, does it put a big shock into it? If it's a big market for you and it's locked down, that can, one guy I was just talking to said he'd stocked up in Kildare for to open up, and all his perishable goods, essentially, it's just trash. You burn 3 or 4K to restock to get the restaurant back up and running, and then 2 weeks later you just throw it in the bin. And that's real money. And something like a cafeteria, small coffee shop restaurant, turning probably 350 to 400 or 500 grand. Might sound like a big number, but actually 4K of cash that now doesn't turn into 10K. That's 4K. You just might as well put it in a fire and burn it. And that's what folks are thinking of, is what does the next shock do? Some schools are going to be shut in the next 6, 8, 10 weeks. What does that shock do? Brings kids back home. Now that puts, so it's not fear, terror, it's the uncertainty. That's probably the best way to say it. And owner managers will adjust and adapt. I mean, that's the nature of the beast.
Yeah.
That's makes them so wonderful.
Yeah. Good. Well, just Fergus, if I give you just a brief testimonial, because I've seen sort of firsthand the work that you do, working with owner managers through the uncertainty, both pre-COVID and at the moment. And I think you guys are doing a brilliant job. You know, I've seen the sort of the before and after of companies. So be a heartily recommendation certainly from my side, and each of the finance people that we've worked with you on, you know, would certainly speak. I know they like having you guys do it under the phone. So look, we might do this again. Hopefully in the next 6 months, we'll be in a little bit of a clearer space now, and things will have moved forward a little bit. But just I really appreciate your time today.
Super stuff, Paul. Thanks very much for having me.
Cheers.